Welcome everybody to the Promoting Your Charging Station breakout room. We're really glad to have you all as part of this conversation, and I'm really looking forward to it, especially in light of everything that Whitney presented in her keynote. So my name is Caitlin Rose. I'm the coordinator for the Triangle Clean Cities Coalition. We're based out of Durham, North Carolina, and housed at Triangle J Council of Governments. And we're one of 3 Clean Cities coalitions in the state of North Carolina. I'm also joined by one of the other Clean Cities coordinators, Jason Wager. Jason, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, oh, still morning, yep. I'm here in the Greater Charlotte region at the Central Atlanta Regional Council, serve as the Assistant Planning Director and also as a co-coordinator for the Central Atlanta Clean Fuels Coalition. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So Jason and I are going to be serving as moderators for this session today. And just for a quick background about the Clean Cities Coalitions, I know Jacob mentioned that we are moderating some of the breakout sessions today, but we work very closely with Plug-in NC and other groups around the state to reduce the use of gasoline-powered vehicles in favor of other alternatives like electric vehicles and other alternative fuels such as propane, CNG, biodiesel, and others. And do a lot of education and outreach and working with local fleets to sort of right-size solutions that best fit the use case. So we're really excited to be part of this discussion today. A lot of our work recently has focused on electrification related to charging deployment. And we think a lot about corridors and connecting major metro areas with smaller rural towns in between. So I think this is a really good fit for a lot of the things that the coalitions have been thinking about recently. So we're really lucky to have 2 great presenters today. We're joined by Tom Rhodes, who is the Green Travel Program Manager for NCDEQ, and Leah Cooper, who is the Sustainability Coordinator at Sierra Nevada Brewing. So I'll turn things over to Tom first. I'm going to advance the slides 1 to your first slide, and you should be able to take control. Awesome.
All right, very good. Thank you for the invitation. I'm really looking forward to learning more about PEVs and plug-in stations. But NC Green Travel has had the privilege of working with Plug-in NC for some time now. And one of the things that we do is we promote the use of plug-in vehicles and installation of chargers in order to help the members of the NC Green Travel Initiative to become more sustainable. And so NC Green Travel is a partnership with DEQ, which I am an employee of, East Carolina University, Waste Reduction Partners, and Visit NC, and they help to promote our initiative. And so the things that we promote are lodging, dining, attractions, museums, and other things where people can go visit and be a part of in the tourism industry. We have tools for locating charging stations and travel tourism on our website, and there are a lot of ways that people can find the places that we have as members. We have about 228 members of the NC Green Travel Initiative, and we help to promote them by giving them free listings on our website and promoting them in other ways. For instance, we have applications that can be downloaded from our main website, ncgreentravel.org, and they can order or download these applications and fill them out electronically and return them to us and become certified as sustainable destinations. And one of the things that we promote is the installation of charging stations. and that helps more people to come to these destinations, and helps them to know exactly where they want to go, and where they can go that they can charge their vehicle. For instance, at restaurants, patrons stay longer. They purchase more things like additional wine, coffee, desserts, which helps to increase the profits of those businesses while they're charging their vehicles. Restaurants are more likely to attract repeat customers who have PEVs if they have the plug-in stations. And more consumers are making choices based on the environmental impact of their travels. So going to a green restaurant or a green hotel is really important to them. And an increasing number of tourism destinations are installing those vehicle charging stations. We probably have about 20 in our program that have charging stations available either nearby or actually at the destination. And Ecotality Incorporated produces storage technologies, and they did a research project in the saying that EV drivers return to commercial sites with charging stations 3 times as much as their regular customers. And consumers who use smart phone apps are more likely to visit those tourism-oriented businesses as well if they have chargers. Several of the ones that we have on our program, Umstead in Cary, Hampton Inn, Makoto's Japanese Steakhouse in Boone, Museum of Life and Science in Durham, and a house in Newbern, and quite a few more. The Umstead installed 3 chargers as part of their sustainability program early on. 1 is for Tesla, and 2 are level 2 chargers. And although they don't advertise it directly on their main website, they do have a section on sustainability talking about their sustainability efforts, and they do mention the chargers under that. Hampton Inn in Jacksonville, I was involved with an assessment that we have. We work with waste reduction partners to help businesses become more sustainable, and they are a very good organization to work with. When I was there doing the assessment, noticed that they have 3 ChargePoint vehicle chargers, and they don't charge guests for their use. However, and they don't advertise them on their website. However, they have photos posted on their sustainability page, and they will, additional cars can come and charge there for a rate of $10 per charge. Makoto's Steakhouse in Boone has 2 chargers, and the owners of the restaurants purchased a Tesla, so they installed a new Gen 2 wall unit for their Tesla charging station behind the restaurant, and they allow the customers to use those. And the owners also liked that so well that they installed a level 2 charger in their parking lot for customers who drive other brands of PEVs. This is one of my favorites, Hannah House B&B in Newbern. They installed a Tesla charger with funding assistance from Tesla, and they also added a level 2 charger at their own expense. And the Museum of Life and Science received a grant from Duke Energy to install chargers at their facility. And they were in the main parking lot. And they have 3 chargers there, and they intend to install 3 more chargers in their new parking lot. They just built a large parking garage next door, and they're going to be installing 3 chargers there as well. Tarboro Brewing Company was fortunate enough to be in the same parking lot with the city administrative building that has a charger, and they have a dual charging unit, level 2 unit back in the parking lot. But they've found that owners of PEVs come for a charge and stop in and just have a pint. And North Carolina Zoo in Asheboro is really great. They have they don't charge anything for charging stations, and they have 6 level 2 charge point ports, and they're open 24 hours a day. So if you're there after the zoo, you can charge up. They don't charge anything for that. And so they plan on installing 8 charging stations in addition to that. Now, for the NC Green Travel Initiative, we promote sustainable tourism. We offer the applicants free listing on our website, and the each listing is has a link to their main website where people can sign up for a room or make reservations for their hotel, and many things that they can do there. They also get a certificate and door decals for the program to promote their sustainable or green destination. And they can get there and download an application from the NC Green Travel website, ncgreentravel.org, and receive no-cost technical assistance. And we have a lot of things on our website for sustainable tips and things that they can do to be even greener, including install PEV plug-in stations. And you can get in touch with me at my email address, tom.rhodes@ncdnr.gov, or call me at 707-8140, and look at our website, ncgreentravel.org, and learn more about it. Okay.
Great, thanks so much, Tom. I definitely learned a lot from that presentation, and I used to live right down the road from the Museum of Life and Science, so I was definitely happy to see them spotlighted. It looks like our slides just went away, but while I get them pulled back up, I'm going to turn things over to Leah from Sierra Nevada to introduce herself, and I'll hopefully be able to share these slides really quickly.
Hey everyone, I'm really excited to be here. This is a pretty instrumental time in the shift towards EVs, so I'm glad to be talking with you today. As you just heard, I'm Leah Cooper. I'm the Sustainability Manager for Sierra Nevada's Mills River Brewery, and I'm going to talk a little bit today about why we've invested in EVs and the outcomes that we've seen from those investments, and then how we've shared that story with consumers.
Sorry, one more second. I might just pull them up and share my screen because Teams is being a little bit slow, but just give me 1 second. Okay. All right, can you guys see those slides?
Okay, go ahead and see if you can make it full screen. Yeah, perfect.
Awesome. Okay, so I'll just go through and advance the slides, Leah, if you just want to say next slide, and I'll click through for you.
Okay.
You need to go about 10 or so ahead.
All right, you can hop to the next slide here. I always like to start these presentations by giving a short introduction to the company and our sustainability program, just to set the stage. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Sierra Nevada was founded by Ken Grossman in Chico, California in 1980. And Ken is an avid outdoorsman and inherent environmentalist, so sustainability was a key part of our operations from day one. A lot has changed over the past few decades. Sierra Nevada is now the third largest craft brewery in the United States. We brew over 1 million barrels of beer a year between our Mills River, North Carolina brewery and our Chico brewery. But through it all, we are still family owned and operated, and sustainability is still a key component of our company story. You can go to the next slide here. And that's because we believe in order to be a long-lasting and resilient company, we really need to understand and take into account the financial, social, and environmental impacts of our business. Sierra Nevada's sustainability program strives to be climate resilient, nature positive, and people powered. And we approach those aspirations in 2 different ways. The first of which is focusing on our operations. Are there ways that we can be more efficient internally and reduce our impacts? But we also know the risks that we face as a business are global and systemic. So in addition to working on improving within our 4 walls, we also engage in a series of systems change actions, which include things like engaging with our supply chain, advocating for policies in alignment with our values, and building relationships within our communities. And I think EV chargers are really a perfect example of this strategy in play, because not only do they reduce our operational footprint, they reduce our company's greenhouse gas emissions from our company fleet as well as employee commuting, but they also support systems level change by creating infrastructure in the community to shift towards EV drivers or EV driving. You can go to the next slide here. And this is why Sierra Nevada has invested in EV charging for a very long time. We installed our first chargers at our Chico facility in 2009, and we were the first company in the region to install EV charging. In fact, we were even ChargePoint's first retail customer. There weren't a lot of drivers at that point in time. In fact, the 2 EV chargers that we had installed sat empty for 2 years. No one used them for 2 years until our owner bought an electric vehicle. Shortly after that, the company purchased several electric vehicles to use in our fleet. And then since then, we've seen that demand really skyrocket. So we've grown our offerings over the years. Now we have 6 electric vehicle chargers on site that have the capacity to charge up to 8 vehicles at a time. And we're constantly seeing those chargers in use. You can go to the next slide. We wanted to bring that same ethos to our Mills River brewery. So when we constructed the facility in 2014, we installed 2 level 2 Eaton chargers. And we did that because we're very close to Eaton and we thought it was a really great relationship to build. But as Eaton shifted away from building EV chargers over the years, we found it really difficult to maintain our chargers and to find replacement parts for when things were broken. So in 2017, 2018, we opted into a ChargePoint replacement program that allowed us to replace our EV chargers with ChargePoint chargers at a significantly reduced price. And this was fantastic for a couple reasons. One, it allowed our chargers to be networked, which means our consumers can see when they're available and they can sign up on a wait list. It also allowed us a modicum of control and when and how and where people could use our chargers. And then finally, it provided data for us. So we finally understood how those chargers were being used. Previously, when we had our old Eaton chargers, we had received several emails and different comments and complaints from guests over the years about how there wasn't a lot of charger availability, asking us to invest in more EV chargers. But from a qualitative perspective, when our plant manager and our owner were walking by those chargers, they never saw anyone using them. So we didn't really have the data to demonstrate that these chargers were being used and were successful until we installed our ChargePoint chargers. And then we saw that we had a ton of users. Our employees were using those ChargePoint chargers, and then we had a lot of consumers coming in and using them as well. So in 2021, earlier this year, we installed 2 additional chargers in our east lot, and these chargers are used primarily by employees, removing that pressure from our guest-facing chargers, but they'll also be used as overflow when those chargers are unavailable. So now altogether, we can accommodate 6 vehicles at a time on site. You can go to the next slide here. And this has been widely successful for the brewery for a variety of different reasons. For even those consumers that maybe don't have EVs but are sustainably minded, seeing our EV chargers out front is one way that we can demonstrate our values, demonstrate all these things we talk about in a very tangible, concrete way. So we're sharing our story with all sorts of consumers coming on site. But it also is a huge perk for employees. It makes a lot of sense for employees who are looking to work at Sierra Nevada. When we first installed our Eaton chargers, none of our employees had EV electric vehicles on site. But now we have enough employees with electric vehicles that we had to install chargers specifically for them to use. So it's really changed people's perspective and allowed them to have the infrastructure to actually buy these electric vehicles and charge them when they come to work. But more than just that, we're also seeing a lot of consumers come to our site specifically because of these EV chargers, like you've heard throughout some of these other presentations today. We have a lot of locals that come regularly, but we're also in a really great position on a main corridor where tourists coming from Charlotte and Atlanta and Greenville to Asheville can really easily stop at our site and have a beer and charge up and then finish their trip. So we've seen a lot of unique individual users. You can go to the next slide here. And we've really seen that trend grow. This demonstrates the number of unique drivers, so drivers that are individuals coming on site and charging. And while we have a huge number of drivers that come back regularly, and we have a significant number of sessions compared to these numbers of unique drivers, we can see that that trend is really increasing here. In 2018, we had 300 unique drivers charge on site here at Sierra Nevada. And then in 2019, we had 500 on site. So that was a really big increase. Because of the pandemic and COVID, we've been closed for most of 2020 and for the vast majority of 2021. But now that we're open, even just at half capacity, our tours aren't even operating right now, we're seeing that number steadily continue to increase. And we expect to continue to see this in the future. You can go to the next slide. There's a lot of different ways that we share this investment with consumers. Our EV chargers aren't a main part of our marketing campaign, and we don't do a lot of marketing initiatives targeted towards sharing the story of EV chargers, but there are a lot of different ways that we share that story in a soft way. And that includes everything from having our chargers visible and available on all the different networks and maps that EV drivers use to plan their routes, but it also includes things like partnering with local nonprofits or industry groups. And we've done a lot of events where we host electric vehicles on site, we show them off with the Blue Ridge EV Club and then other groups, Land of Sky, and then highlight our EV chargers. So there's all sorts of ways that you can highlight your chargers without necessarily having some big marketing campaign around them. We've also been highlighted by our vendors, so developing these great long-term relationships have created opportunities for vendors to write case studies about us or share our story within their own media, which then in turn gets our name out there as well. And then finally, I really encourage you to also include your chargers as an employee perk and include it in conversations around total rewards, because not only is it a great way to bring consumers to your site, it's also a really great way to retain and attract talent that maybe either aligns with your values or would be a great long-term employee. You can go to the next slide here. So just wrapping this up, I wanted to share a handful of lessons learned. The biggest one for us at Sierra Nevada was to plan ahead. In the best case scenario, perfect world, we would have loved to see all of our chargers in the same spot out front of the brewery. But when we built the brewery and installed both of our chargers out front, we didn't include any infrastructure for additional chargers. We weren't planning ahead. We weren't thinking about the future. And in order to install that infrastructure, we would have had to dig up our entire parking lot, which is incredibly disruptive to business and also incredibly expensive. So we had to find a new location to add additional chargers. With that in mind, as we installed new chargers this year, we made sure that we had access to conduit and wiring to install additional chargers in the future. And that's something I highly encourage all of you to do as well. Another lesson learned for us was the need to take control and look for equipment that allows us to modify and control hours, control charging times, and then potentially even allow us the opportunity to charge for the future. Right now we offer free charging for all of our consumers, but we really want to see electric vehicles transition to the main way that people drive around. And having free charging, while it's great at this initial stage, may not be the best way moving forward. So we want to make sure we have the opportunity to charge in the future. And then finally, make sure you ask for help. There's tons of funding available for you and a lot of industry groups that are there to talk to you about what different types of plugs are, what you should look for when you're looking at equipment, what funding might be available to you, what you can take advantage of. So make sure you reach out to those local groups and ask for help. You don't have to do this in a vacuum. And that's all I have today, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Awesome, thank you, Leah. I did want to echo your sentiment about asking for help and wanted to give a quick plug for Clean Cities. That's something that we do often, especially when it comes to providing assistance for applying for those funding sources you mentioned. So wanted to throw ourselves out there as a resource as well. So as we transition into the Q&A portion of this session, I wanted to encourage folks who are listening in, if you have questions, feel free to throw those in the chat. I've got a couple of planned questions that I'll go through, but once we get to the end of those, I would, if you guys are interested and willing, love to see people come off mute, ask questions, and participate in the discussion as they see fit. So I wanted to think back to Tom's original presentation. So I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the scoring process. So when you said applicants, fill out that application, and when you're reviewing those, how do you score, interested businesses to become part of the Green Travel Program?
We have a team of 3 reviewers, and we compare notes, and we can add points for each thing that the applicant is doing if we want to, and we make sure that all the things that they are doing are really things that they're doing. We like to get input from other people and make sure that these businesses are truly being green. And so we do spot checks on this buildings and the members, and make sure that what they're doing is what they're saying they're doing.
Awesome. Yeah, and just specifically about the electric vehicle charging piece. So it was indicated that applicants score higher if they have electric vehicle charging on site. Do they score more for each charging station, or is it just like a flat score if they have any amount of charging?
We are in the process of revising our applications. The application that is online right now gives 5 points for having charging stations, but we intend to add extra points for each additional station that they have.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great to hear, and hopefully we'll further incentivize folks to participate.
Right.
And Leah, I wanted to pivot over to what's going on at Sierra Nevada and ask if you mentioned that parts of the Chico fleet had been electrified, if there are plans to expand that at the Mills River location or electrifying any larger vehicles as part of the fleet.
Yeah, that's a really great question. We're actually in the process right now of developing a long-term climate strategy that would identify those areas of opportunities. Currently, we don't have any electric vehicles at our Mills River facility, but I certainly would love to see us invest in those, and we've created additional infrastructure for adding more chargers for when that may be the case. We actually don't have any owned long-haul vehicles here at our Mills River Brewery, and we work with a lot of different haulers, so we are working with our suppliers to kind of shift those mindsets. But that, again, is going to be a big part of our strategy, which we haven't really developed yet. So it's an exciting time for us and something I'd like to see in the future.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, I think that's something that a lot of folks around the state are thinking about. So definitely looking forward to seeing that develop in the coming years. I was really struck in the keynote presentations by Whitney's presentation about the real power of EV charging as an economic development tool. And it seems like data is probably one of the most important pieces of that conversation. And I know, Leah, you mentioned how important having access to data about charging utilization was. And I wanted to see for both Tom and Leah, if either of you have thoughts about, like, are there additional metrics you think should be collected related to charging utilization that would be helpful to justify that use case? And maybe how you use that data to communicate with, you know, either your bosses or partners or customers about the benefits of EV charging?
That's a really great question. We have a really awesome interface through ChargePoint to see a lot of different data. I was excited to see the zip code information that Whitney had in her presentation. That's not something I have seen in our dashboard. And I don't know if we do have access to that, and I just haven't found it, but I think that would be really helpful for businesses and consumers to be able to see, so we can draw very clear lines of, you know, who is coming to our site and when, and why. I think I'll have to think a little bit more on what other specific information we have. I know that what we have currently has been really helpful with decision making, but maybe Tom has other thoughts on that.
Actually, we don't track that information, but I would like to find a way that we can do that, because it would be essential to making our program a lot stronger.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's something, you know, Triangle Clean Cities is housed at a Council of Governments, and we talk with a lot of folks about the importance of data kind of across all of our programs. So it seems like being able to showcase how chargers are used, who they're used by, and for how often would really help with, you know, in addition to funding incentives, I think the longer term impacts that that could have on economic development and the like would be really important. So speaking of economic development, and we can tie this into my previous question as well, but I just wanted to see Tom and Leah too, if either of you had thoughts about barriers and opportunities to deploying charging in rural areas. Pretty broad question. So
right, it is a broad question. I have to think about that. Sure. Yeah, I would like to promote that our destinations have chargers there on site, and we do have information in our website, and I do have a Facebook site that we promote things like chargers and other things, and if a destination has a charger, or chargers, we can promote that on our Facebook site as well. So we feature 2 destinations each week, and I think that's the biggest tool we have right now.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's something that I think about a lot with Clean Cities, is the importance of featuring those success stories. And I think that's a great opportunity for all of us on this call in terms of our outreach and engagement. But wanted to see if either of you had thoughts maybe about what are we missing when it comes to, educating the public about where chargers are, the benefits of using them, or what are we missing when it comes to educating potential site hosts or potential businesses that could benefit from installing charging?
I think there needs to be a really big paradigm shift in the perception of who is driving EVs and what it means to drive an EV. Historically, I think we all could agree that EVs are driven by wealthier people and higher income areas. But as more and more electric vehicles are produced and people can access used EVs, I think that's going to change, and I hope that really hope that changes. But currently there's the stigma around owning an electric vehicle and who you're serving when installing EV chargers. And I think the same could be said around biking and bike infrastructure. But there needs to be a lot of shifts in how we communicate where EV chargers are, why they've been installed, in order to bring more people into the driver's seats, the EV driver seats.
Yeah, I'm hoping that we can step up our game as far as promoting those. I do get questions from destinations about electric charging stations and how they can fund them. And to a great extent, they're saying, well, they're too expensive. If there were some more funding opportunities for those, I think that would help.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and I wanted to hand it over to Jason. There's been a couple of chat questions, so if you wanted to ask those.
Yeah, sure, Caitlin. And just as a quick update, it looks like our time has been extended to 11:10, so we have a few more minutes to go over 11. One comment, one question, both from Joe Baum. The extensive installation of photovoltaic panels prominently in the Sierra Nevada lot also makes a strong statement of the company values. Thank you. And then the question is, people first get into plug-in, they're looking for places to go, they're fun to drive, and talks a little bit about an electric byway, sort of like the North Carolina Scenic Byway, maybe a good way to connect the dots and promote station locations and the companion businesses. So the question, anything like this going on, or what are the presenters' thoughts? Maybe we'll start with Leah.
I think that's a great idea. As a business, we're happy to share our logo and information with any groups trying to create these types of marketing materials. I don't see our company or really any other small business developing these marketing materials. It takes a lot of time and effort, but I think there's a lot of nonprofits that are working on this type of work and would be willing to look into that, and we'd be happy to support.
Great. And Tom, did you have anything to add?
No, I think Leah nailed it pretty well. I think it would be good to have more resources to put out there, and I think that we can bring our Facebook pages and Twitter pages to bear to promote that.
Great. I know some folks are having to wrap up, but just maybe a couple other quick items. And Leah, you mentioned maybe your fleet and possibilities there. I know that folks at the state working with Governor Cooper, he signed an MOU with 14 other states on medium and heavy duty zero emission vehicles. And I guess, is this a conversation that Sierra Nevada has been involved in yet? And if not, is that something of value or interest to companies like Sierra Nevada to participate in, and why?
Yes, we're very keen and interested in participating in those types of conversations. We've provided feedback for a series of the Volkswagen Settlement Fund conversations, but I haven't been involved specifically in this conversation that you're mentioning. But it's certainly something that we're interested in, and we've begun engaging in more of these systems change level actions because we know we need to engage with our policymakers in order to invest in the things that we want to invest in. And this type of conversation is exactly, what we would need to do in order to buy those electric vehicles and build that part of our strategy.
Great. And I guess in the same vein, there was talk in the main session about having a strategic plan for electric charging, and and you mentioned it too, Leah. Don't just throw them out there. Think ahead a little bit. And so leading to that strategic thinking, or taking that a step further, Tom, you also talked about a variety of destinations. Some where you might be overnight, others where it may be a couple hours. Are there certain things that you all are doing differently now, whether it be scoring, looking at scoring differently with the travel program as to level 2, level 1, DC fast charger being the right fit for the location as one example? Or Leah, you kind of hinted at some things, conduit and some other activities that you were doing right on the site, but anything you all would add to kind of as we go from just getting people interested, don't care how you do it, to more of a, we need to be very precise in how we roll this out. And I'll open it up to either of you.
I think it's important for us to look at our application forms, and I'd like to increase the score. Of course, we have 5 points for having charger stations. I think that, as I mentioned before, that we should add more points for additional chargers, and would consider upping the score for just having a charger. I think that would be very, very good move to make.
And Leah, anything more about fees, able to bill for fees and those specifics, or site specific items, or longer term community strategy?
Yeah, from a site specific strategy, it was really important for us building this new infrastructure that we built for our 2 EV chargers we just installed with the support of the state, to make sure that we can access electricity in that site for additional chargers. So we installed conduit and wiring for about 8 other chargers in that same area, just to make sure that we're prepared in the future. And that was partly driven by the pain of having to install these new EV chargers and not thinking ahead previously, but also in part due to this work we've been doing around strategy. From a community perspective, we can control what we do on our site, but we certainly have a vested interest in what's going on in the community around us. Mills River is a rural area that's rapidly developing, and we have employees that are commuting from 5 or 6 different counties around us, often coming from different rural areas, including Haywood County and other Marion County. So traveling pretty far distances to come work at the facility. So we do try to engage with our surrounding communities on their transportation planning, and at least keep up to date and provide letters of support for shifting towards EVs or building greenways and other ways to make transit more equitable and accessible to others. I don't know if that answered your question, but
yeah, no, it does. It talks a lot about the partner that you're hoping to be in the community. Caitlin, I see one more from Joe. I don't know if we've got time. Joe Baum asked, any comments about the state of roadway signage for the locations of EV charging?
Yeah, before we ask our panelists, I did want to mention to Joe specifically that Clean Cities are thinking about corridor signage, specifically along major highways. And we've been in conversation with the state DOT to kind of figure out what that looks like. But I wanted to kind of add on to that question for our panelists. I know, Leah, you talked about soft advertising for charging stations. So I wonder, if you could talk a little bit about how you sign for your charging stations or advertise on the site like that. And Tom, if you have any examples of businesses that you've worked with that have EV charging and how they've thought about, putting signage up in or around their charging station spots.
We do have charging signs in front of both of our chargers. We don't have any directional signage within our site. Our site is fairly large. I don't know how familiar all of you are with Sierra Nevada, but you have to go around a roundabout and then come up this long driveway, and then we have a huge parking lot. We tried to place our chargers in a very front and center space that is very obvious for consumers to find and see, and I think that helps a little bit. We also often have parking attendants on site, so in place of those physical signs, we do have people kind of directing EV drivers to where those chargers are during busy times and on the weekends when business is happening as usual, sans the pandemic. I think signage, would be helpful outside of our site, directing people to the brewery. I think that would make a huge difference in people finding us. But we've also had a lot of success. I think a lot of people who own EVs, or I would assume a lot of people who own EVs, plan their routes ahead of time. You have to put a lot of thought into where you drive and when you charge. So I think in general, they are familiar with and know and have pre-planned stopping at the brewery, but that certainly is a lot of effort, and that's not something that a lot of people would be willing to do. So as we transition towards electric vehicles, I think signage is going to be much more important than it is currently.
I'm not really aware of any of our members of the NC Green Travel Initiative who have signage up, direction signs or anything. But of course, for the most part, I imagine that the users are consulting the maps available online for charger stations, and that's how they find them.
Yeah, that kind of resonates with what I've heard too. The EV drivers, as you said, Leah, do have to plan routes pretty far in advance and are aware of online tools like PlugShare. I also wanted to mention the Clean Cities tool that's pretty similar, the Alternative Fuels Data Center Station Locator tool, which is available on the Clean Cities DOE website. So it's a similar tool to PlugShare in that it can help you map your route, plan it out, filter by, state, filter by plug type, things like that. So I think you're both probably right that that's maybe right now the most important tool to help people find charging stations. But yeah, definitely as EVs are more ubiquitous, I think larger scale deployments of signage along major roadways is going to be a big deal. Well, it looks like we have about 2 more minutes. So I wanted to finish up with just one last question before I prompt you all to rejoin our main room. So thinking about folks who are just now trying to deploy EV charging in their sites, what advice would you give businesses or municipalities or other groups that are looking to install charging?
I can hop in. Aside from planning ahead, which is maybe my biggest lesson learned, is to really think about what your business or site's needs are. Do you need to control when the chargers are available? And what type of data do you need to make your decisions? And that will really drive the type of equipment that you purchase. And also to think about who you're trying to serve, what types of vehicles you're trying to serve. Tesla chargers are great, but only Tesla users can use them. So really consider that before buying your equipment.
Yeah, I think that's really important to think ahead. Leah, you've got that under control. I think that's really good for the destinations to plan ahead and truly understand that it is good for business.
Awesome. Well, we are right at time. Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Leah, so much for your insights and presentations. I definitely learned a lot and have a lot to think about going forward for my own programming. So thanks everyone for joining us. I think Paul put the link back to the main room, so I'll see you all there.